welcome to the People's Duchess channel. For those of you joining for the very first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. We cover all things royal here with emphasis on the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. If you are a longtime listener, longtime fan of my social media pages, you know that this is a relaunch of the short-lived but much-loved 2020 lockdown series, the People's Duchess podcast. So I'm really happy to be here. It's been a long time, and lockdown ended and mama had to go back to work, pay the bills, but we are here. We are back, and I am super excited because I love covering the royals. It's just a very interesting group of people, and like many around the world, I got interested when Duchess Meghan came onto the scene. I was interested before, but she really brought my interest to the forefront. So right before we get started, just a little fair use. This video is intended for educational purposes only. It is not intended at all to infringe or encourage any kind of negativity. So please do not be negative. And let's get right into it. So getting right into this week's highlights, it has been, I don't know what you would call it. I don't know the Latin word for week, but it has been a horrible week for the royals, specifically Chucks and Cams. They have been greeted everywhere they've gone by the Republic, which is an anti-monarchy group that lobbies for a democratically elected head of state. They are crying out for some sense of democracy. They do not want to be subject to a king. They think that it is completely ridiculous in this day and age to have some random guy pretending to be better than everybody else. So they're out there. They're out there in their yellow shirts, hashtag abolish the monarchy. They are taking a more dignified stance than last month's egg gate. So no eggs being chucked, but equally, if not worse, they're out there and they're organized. They're not just some rogue person expressing his displeasure. They're organized. They have a very large grassroots movement on social media right now. They have a petition that's gotten, I think, well over 11,000 signatures now, the last time I checked anyways. So I would be a little bit nervous if I were greeted by this everywhere I went. And they, it started out earlier in the week with a visit to Colchester, which is a place that just got city status last year. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name, but one thing Brits are going to do is spell things and pronounce things completely differently. And all you chumly individuals can back me up on that. So they went out to this town, Colchester, and if they were greeted positively by anybody, if there were any cheers among the crowd, I couldn't hear any of that. All you hear is the boos, the heckling, the not my kings. It was brutal. Take a look at this. Brutal. That was hard to watch, but in as much as it was hard to watch, I just don't have any empathy for them in this situation. Initially, the empathy did start a little tingling, but quickly was replaced by the fact that they are getting their just desserts. Every time you see any royal story these days, it's about how much Meghan and Harry are going to be booed and yada, 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 da, 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 da. But at the end of the day, it's all projection, isn't it? It's all projection, because that was not a warm reception. And who were they waving to? Who were they waving to? That was so weird. They're like, maybe it was habitual. I get it. You see a camera, you're kind of predisposed to wave, but they were waving to the crowd. And I don't know about you, but I didn't hear a single well-wisher in that crowd. If there were, I didn't hear it. I didn't hear any cheers. It was all not my king and boos. And, I'm not like necessarily reveling in that or anything like that. But isn't it strange how every single thing that you guys have wished for Meghan and Harry has actually been a projection of the debilitating state that you happen to be in, the royals? It's not lost on anybody. In fact, that's a lot of the conversation on Twitter right now, is how everything that they have wished for out loud in various various articles through their, royal mouthpieces in the press has been a projection of what you are going through. And that's why the Republic is here. They're trying to just get a referendum going so that they can have the conversation and possibly the opportunity to elect someone as their leader versus having these people who no one knows. I mean, no one knows at the end of the day why the monarchy still exists today. I mean, I get it, it's hereditary and it's been a thing forever, but a lot of people are considering stopping that. Canada is definitely considering stopping that. They've been on this tip for a while. Australia has also been on this tip. Very recently, the Caribbean, I mean, Will and Kate were fired live and in 4K in Jamaica. Britons have definitely been asking about the monarchy and the place of the monarchy in everyone's lives since the Queen's passing. And it happened again. They are out there really asking, not so politely, but asking, we need to talk to you, Charles. We do need to talk to you because things are different and the only constant is change, right? So I get it. It's a time-honored tradition. It's an old school institution, but not everything can survive through millennia after millennia. And it probably shouldn't. I mean, society is different, mentalities are different. And this led to a very curious moment outside of the church where Camilla kind of ran, I guess, into the church. People say it's because it was windy and she was trying to hold her hat and da 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 da, but I don't buy that for a second. What I do think is that she was over it, and I will give her just a small, tiny slice of the benefit of the doubt here and say that she did so because she was embarrassed. I mean, you could not avoid that large crowd. You could not avoid those yellow signs. You could not avoid the booing. And I think that she was just mortally embarrassed. And not that it's any better. I mean, a snub is a snub. She still did the wrong thing. But what else is new? I mean, that's just typical Camilla being rude. But in this case, I feel like she was just showing her lack of etiquette, her lack of readiness for the role, her lack of decorum, which are all just typically Camilla. She's the least trained person I've ever seen in my life. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to call her names or be negative, but as far as she's no Queen Elizabeth, she's not couth, she's not kempt, she's not trained, she's not classy, she doesn't have that air of etiquette and decorum. Certainly I would not have ran past those Maori. I don't care how much the wind was blowing. It doesn't matter that the wind was blowing my hat off. So, and it didn't get better when they got into the church. I mean, Charles got up there and made this completely ridiculous, hypocritical speech. He got up there, he was waxing philosophic about the Commonwealth, trying to convince, I guess, only himself about how much he loves the Commonwealth. Oh, this is the quote right here, that it continues to amaze and inspire him. And I swear, if I had rolled my eyes any harder, they would have popped out. Because what? You love diversity? You're inspired by diversity? Oh, okay, you mean arm's length diversity. Okay, that's what you mean. You mean see but don't touch diversity. You mean as long as you guys are outside of where I have to see you, you're okay. But don't ever, ever for a minute try to infiltrate my family, because that diversity is not appreciated. So you can be diverse, you just can't be, Meghan Markle diverse and in my family, So it was just the most ridiculous speech, a lot of floral, flowery language, a lot of, fakery and nonsense. It just, I would have given anything to see the faces of everybody watching that speech in that church, because I can only see and imagine, I can only imagine that they probably were either side-eyeing or also rolling their eyes. Well, the people of color in that church anyways, and around the world, because it's the things that you do are much more important than the things that you say. So all of this getting up there and talking is stupid. It's dumb. We know better. We know that you guys are degenerate. We know that you have press friends that say very deplorable things because you are deplorable. Andy was notably absent because he's deplorable. You're only there because your mom, but individually speaking, you by yourself have done some extremely deplorable things, including tormenting your young wife, including you and your mistress tag teaming her to torture her to within an inch of her sanity. Do you know what kind of psychopath you have to be to actually mentally torture a person? I've studied psychology. I have a bachelor's degree in industrial organizational psychology, and I would never be able to stomach tormenting somebody. I'd rather just not talk to you. And I get it. You married her for her womb and yada, yada. You guys had to do what you had to do. But you didn't have to torment her. You didn't have to gaslight her into thinking she was crazy. And then here comes your real wife, your work wife, who is also the real wife, behind your wife, your public wife, trying to rehabilitate her image at all cost after your wife's tragic passing. At anybody's expense. She did this for decades. Harry kind of let us know about the throwing up under the bus. And I guess before Meghan, it was Kate. And even till today, it sounds like it's still Kate. I don't get the idea or the impression that these two are particularly close. You never see the Middletons over. You don't see Camilla socializing with them as if they were part of the clan, other than on large occasions. And you have to really ask yourself, so what is royalty then? For me, royalty, the British royal family, these two images here represent everything. For a lot of people, royalty represents a strange faith-based superstition that they have the right, the birthright, the absolute right to rule over people, to steal their things, to take their land, do whatever they want. And, it's okay because God said that they could. It's okay. God said we could do this. And then there's this trinket over here, and I don't know what it's called. I didn't bother to look it up because I don't actually care. My point is, why are you handing this out? What is this? And it's deliberate and it's ridiculous. And I just think it's such a shame because it really does highlight the fact that that diversity that you speak of does not exist in your family, does not even exist in your close friend group, because what the actual F is this? Had I seen this as a person of color that was close enough to you to advise you on anything, as far as just peripherally, right? Like, here's my new placard, here's what we're going to be. I'd have been like, ooh, are you sure you want to do that? Because this kind of thing should have been completely demolished and abolished right around the time that slavery was abolished. Y'all should not have had this circulating anywhere after the 1900s, late 1800s, 1900s at the latest, because this is just completely unacceptable. I mean, what the actual heck is this? It is so deeply offensive and just ridiculous for all the obvious reasons. It is just ridiculous. And so I guess they don't circulate it anymore, but it was a recently decommissioned piece. And I mean recently. So you have to really start asking these questions because it's important to understand where they're coming from. I'm not going to give them credit for decommissioning this piece. They have no right or reason to do what they're doing, but they do it because, hey, look, we're royal. You've got this lady, and I don't mean to pick on Camilla, but she's had significant issues with alcohol. She's had significant issues with her son being a cocaine dealer. She herself is a heavy smoker, heavy drinker. She's been to rehab a bunch of times. Her son deals coke. In what way does that make you better than anyone else? In what way does that history make you a more appropriate and handpicked by God to rule over anyone? I've never done drugs. I don't drink. And many people don't do drugs or drink. So what makes any of us not ordained, but you who has tons of vices, including adultery, including probably drug use? I don't put it past her, because if your son's a cocaine dealer, a prolific cocaine dealer like that, no, I don't put nothing past nobody at all, at all. So, you're a notorious bully. It just you don't strike anybody as the type of person that God would smile down upon favor and say, you, more than anyone else, deserve this. I mean, of all the actual religious people, of all the priests, of all the, pastors and everyone else that are actually faith-based, that actually live their lives according to the Bible, according to God's word, you are the one he picked. Like, what? And Charles too, like, your mom was the queen, and I think that that's the only reason why people have bided their time. But look at the family dynamics. You got Andy over here running around with a pedo. You've got all the males basically in that family running around with pedos. It makes no sense to me. I don't know any pedos. I don't know any people like that. I mean, sure, there's some sketchy folks in my family, but it strikes me as odd that a family with such a prolific history of degeneracy, all the way back to Lord Mountbatten, would be the chosen ones. I'm not buying it. I'm sorry, but I am not buying that you guys, with the history that you have, are ordained by God himself over actual clergy people. And I'm not saying clergy people are the best, but they're better than them. And then there's Will and Kate, who apparently get violent with each other. And don't get me started on the Queen Mother. I mean, and I'm not sitting here in judgment of any of these people. I think that the only reason I'm able to talk about this is because I am not in a position to require them to look at me as if I'm better than them. These individuals, these royal family members, are in positions where they say, look at me as better. Bow to me when you see me, because I am better than you. So when you see me, bow down on your knees to me. And you've got the most degenerate history up until Meghan came. And now there's a lot of American attention. There's a lot of, persons of color attention. And we're asking these questions because we've seen the history, and the math ain't mathin'. Now, if anybody were going to be the kind of princess that you would expect them to be in the capacity of being ordained by God, Meghan fits that bill. I mean, she fits that bill. She's done everything that she needed to do. And it's just weird. It's really strange because Meghan has lived this completely atypical life for the betterment of mankind. She's done things that the average person has never done and will never do. She's accomplished more in her time than most people in a lifetime. So if you really wanted that example of someone who was born and destined to be great, she has lived that life. She has walked that path. She did everything from, the organizing the protests when she was just a kid, to changing that commercial, to writing her congressman, to, going to her Catholic all-girls school, then attending Ivy League University, working at the UN. It's just been a very modern day princess kind of story in a life, and she's never put a foot wrong. Prior to being in that family, she was never ever in the headlines for anything. You never saw her stumbling out of the club at 3 a.m. with Drake. You never saw her in some kind of beef with any other woman. You never saw her in any situation that was compromising or embarrassing. I mean, everything that you read about her prior to 2017 was great. So there's a lot to be desired here. There's a lot left to be desired. And I think the real questions need to be asked. Should they abolish the monarchy? Should they at least have a referendum on whether or not they should abolish the monarchy? Should they at least have a conversation about it? I think that it's really telling that they won't, despite how popular they claim the monarchy is. For all the tourism it brings in and all the popularity that they seemingly enjoy, if you're listening to all the royal reporters and the, folks online, the royalists, they're very popular. So why don't they at least let the people have a referendum on whether or not to keep them versus shoving the monarchy down their throats and forcing them to come out of pocket when they can't even afford to feed their children and heat their homes? They're in the midst of a massive cost of living crisis, and the coronation is just being shoved down their throats. And nobody thinks that's fair. I don't think it's fair. And I'm glad that I'm not over there because I don't have to deal with that. But I feel badly for the individuals who are and don't have the choice. So let me know in the comments, guys. Should they abolish the monarchy? Should they have a referendum on the monarchy? Like, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on some of the stuff that we've discussed in the video today? Let me know down below. Bye. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. See you next week.